I think with the, like, especially with the growth of things like the Steam Deck, we're seeing a lot more people like that coming over to Linux space. And it is leading to a bit of this, I don't know, over the past maybe, I guess since I started using Linux, I've noticed this weird culture shift happening in Linux. Because back when I first started, maybe this is just the people that I was surrounding myself with. When I first started, the whole everything must be free software, always free software, nothing but free software. That was the message I was getting back when I first started. But
Yeah.
I've seen people now who don't care if it's proprietary, they don't make a distinction between free software and open source. They've accepted that MIT is like the license of the free software world now, because that's what it is. Like, people don't, for the most part, make new GPL projects. There are some exceptions, but most of the projects we're seeing are MIT projects, BSD projects. We're not seeing as many GPL style projects anymore. And this is leading to like this weird clash between the people who are classically using Linux and this newer crowd that is, I guess, less interested in that and more interested in the technical aspect, like what they can get out of the system, rather than the ethical concerns attached to the kind of software you use.
Yeah. Well, I was on the same, like, I was bombarded with the same free software messaging you were.
Mm-hmm.
I have same opinion that I had before. The ethics have nothing to do here.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that. It's all about what works for you and what you want to use. Simple as that. And if they don't want to use proprietary software, they have all right to not use it. That's the freedom of software.
Mm-hmm. So you're very much on the pragmatic aspect of it then.
Yeah.
The software that does the job is the software that is the good software.
Yeah. I also am the person who will use MIT, but that's because I think it's actually much freer license than GPL. In my opinion, freedom of the developers is just as important as freedom of users.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this
something
is... sorry, go on.
GPL doesn't... freedom of developers is something GPL doesn't take into account.
Yeah, this is I think where the big culture clash exists, because when people say free software, like, that has a very particular meaning. It means the FSF definition of freedom. But when someone thinks of the term freedom, like, that doesn't really align with this thing that intentionally restricts the freedom of certain people involved in a system. I don't know, like, what is, like, ultimately correct, but I can definitely see the direction that things are going. We are shifting away very, very quickly from the copyleft, from, like, all of this stuff that has classically been here. It's always going to have a place. Like, there's always, like, the Linux kernel is always going to be GPL v2. Torvalds has said he has no interest in GPL v3. He doesn't care about TiVoization, and relicensing it to, like, MIT at this point, that would be an absolute nightmare to do. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And you're always going to have the... I don't see any reason why the GNU core tooling would go away. Like, I know BusyBox has gotten a lot better than it used to be, and we're probably going to get to a point eventually where compiling the kernel with
rewrite everything in Rust.
Yes. We're gonna get, I know there was the Amazon project where they were rewriting the core tools in Rust, which I love.
Who hasn't tried that?
Right, but if Amazon's backing it, they have money and they have developers, so that's feasible in their case. But where was I going with that? Free software,
Clang and Linux kernel.
Oh yes, Clang. Thank you. We're gonna get to a point where compiling Linux with Clang is going to be as good as GCC, and maybe we see a shift over to BusyBox as the main tooling. But I like, that's not something I really see being like a future that people are pushing for. So there's still going to be
Yeah.
those core systems, but
Yeah.
all of the software you run on top of that, it's getting more and more MIT every single day.
It is getting more open source, less free software.
Yes, yes.
Honestly, basically that's what it means.
Which, depending on who you are, you would argue is more freedom than the free software side.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've always said that I respect what the free software movement has done, but for my personal system, I am a more pragmatic user. As I said, my first browser on Linux was Vivaldi, which, if you ask DT, is proprietary garbage.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this. Free Software Foundation and all people surrounding it, they did a lot of good in the years that passed. Simple as that. Their time has passed. There is a change of generation happening. New people are coming, and with that comes new ideas, new values even, and that is the big problem for that crowd. And there is certain percentage that will stay, that will bring the message forward, and you have all space to do it. I'm not stopping you, and nobody should stop you. Well, that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that the funnier thing with like the new generation coming up is we've already seen like some of these like new young leaders, like the like Asahi leader, the developer of Asahi Linux. You've got like Leo Rowe over on Libre Boot. You've got a bunch of other people out there who are doing great things. But my favorite part is the people who are, like, I think Leah's one of them, who in some cases are more extreme about free software than the FSF. Because I don't know if you saw it, but Libre Boot had this blog post where basically they argued that the Free Software Foundation actually doesn't care about free software because they don't care about the software that is embedded into the hardware that the user cannot change. That, like, they don't consider that as part of the software in the system. So that's not something that you need to be concerned with. But in this, like, in like Libre Boot's case, they're like, no, if that's not going to be open, then the whole free software thing doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't, like, the idea they had was, if your firmware embedded into the hardware, the FSF doesn't really care about that because it's not something the user is intended to change. But if that same firmware is something loaded as you boot the system, in that case, it's proprietary and you shouldn't be running it. But it's still the exact same software in the end. So wouldn't the loading the firmware as you boot be the better option? Because then the user can, like, reverse engineer it. They can analyze it. They can change it, as opposed to having it embedded in the hardware where it's always going to be proprietary and nobody can touch it.